This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FI Investment Group, and your host of Washington Calling, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, we are very fortunate to have a distinguished guest who also happens to be a dear friend, and his name is Shahid Siddiqui. He was the chairperson of the Congress Minority Cell, National General Secretary of Samajwadi Party from 2000 to 2009, Chairman of National Council for Promotion of Urdu Language, and a member of Raj Sabha from 2000 to 2002 to 2008. So Shahid, thank you for coming to our show. Welcome to our show. It's truly a pleasure and honor to have a conversation with you. And thank you for all you're doing to make a difference. Well, I would say a meaningful and profound difference. And you are shaping our history and our future. You are keeping the flame of hope alive and well.
Thank you. Thank you.
So please tell us about yourself, who you are. You have been a politician, an editor, a parliamentarian, and a minority rights activist. You wear many hats. And I want to ask you another question to you. What do we need to do for the Indians to live together, to work together across the religious boundary and the differences? And what we need to do to heal together? What need we to do to ensure that we can redeem the promise, potential, and possibilities of India together?
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure. Yes, I do wear many hats because we can't have the luxury, especially with the Muslim community in India, post-partition. We didn't have the luxury of division of labor. A person had to perform different tasks in the field of education, social reforms, politics, and I used my journalism, I used my newspaper to bring about changes in the thinking, in the mentality of our own people, because post-partition, there was hardly any leadership left for Muslims. Most of the educated migrated to Pakistan. Those who were left were the poor, the working class, and the ruler folk. So that's why I decided to work among the Muslims, especially, to bring them into the national mainstream, to build bridges with other communities. Because in India, we understand that we have to live together. There is no other way for all of us to survive and for our nation to survive. And that's why I decided this job for me, this role for me. And therefore, to play this role, I did politics, I did journalism, I did social reform, and especially, yes, Urdu is my love. And I decided to go into Urdu journalism, definitely, deliberately. I was a Delhi University. I did my MA in political science. I immediately became a professor in Delhi University for political science. I was a university topper, a gold medalist. And I got selected into IAS, the highest civil service in India. But I decided to work through Urdu among the Muslims to bring them into the mainstream and to bring about changes in them. So that was the thing. And the other question you have asked is what we really need to do. And that's exactly what we need to do, is to create understanding. Unfortunately, we have lived together for more than 1,000 years together.
Right.
But despite that, we fail to understand. We have lived in our compartments. Those compartments are to be broken. We have lived in our shelf, and especially Muslims went into a shell in the post-partition period. So that shell had to be broken. Their confidence had to be restored in India, in India's democracy, India's constitution. And that's what I tried to do through my politics, through my journalism. And how far I succeeded, I don't know, but I am happy and satisfied that Indian Muslims prove to the world that we are different. Indian democracy is different. India is different. And that's what, but we need to do a lot. It's not that our job is over. Job has begun. For a nation, for 70 years are not a very, very long period. But yes, for us, it was a difficult period. We have come out of that.
Thank you for all you're doing and bringing the people together. And when we're together, we can help shape a better and a brighter future for India. As you know, you have been part of many political parties at various times. Please share with our viewer, what made you to change political affiliation so frequently? Before you talk about, I want you to tell why people should be engaged politically as you have been. And do you believe that the practice creates a common cause and everyone should be engaged politically? And let me rephrase what President Kennedy once said. In a democracy, everyone should be involved in politics, and the kind of government that we get depends how we fulfill our responsibilities as a democratic nation.
Absolutely. I totally agree with what John F. Kennedy said. He was a hero for me, and it was a shock. One of the biggest shock in my life was his assassination, and I was a very young boy at that time, and I did cry at that moment. But and this is exactly what we have been doing. That and that's the reason I changed my parties. I mean, you will say why? The problem is that in a democracy, especially in a very, very say complex country like India, in a country where democracy is still evolving, the system is evolving, the party system is evolving. The parties change their attitude once they are in power. Out of power, they have an ideology. In power, the only ideology remains is how to remain power, how to use power, and that's where I'm an ideological person. I develop my differences, but I have not changed my ideology, and I have not moved from one ideological party to the other. These three parties I have been in fact, are all ideologically on the same page. The only the Samajwadi Party, which is a socialist party, the Bahujan Samaj Party, again a socialist party with focus on the Dalits, the backward, the poor, and Congress, which was again a socialist, secular, democratic party. So all these three parties are secular as well as socialist and democratic. The only difference between them are their leaders, the ego of their leaders, the contest of their leaders, and that's why I never changed my ideology. I did change parties for the reason where when I realized that I could not play the role I want to play, and my role was always my focus, as I said in the very beginning, in politics is not to become to be in power. My role is to change the mindset of our people, especially of Muslims, and to bring them into the democratic mainstream, because I realize that Muslims can develop in my country only through democratic means, by the power of their vote. And this power of the vote has empowered everybody, especially the poor and the Muslims, despite difficult times, did not move out of what was they were left by the Muslim League leadership in India. But that's a different question.
So all the party affiliations that you had, you had the same ideology, but you wanted to seek a common ground, but stand on your ground to make a difference.
Yes, right? And I may add one more thing. I played a very, very important and crucial role in 1992. 6 December 1992, terrible incident took place when Babri Masjid was demolished. Yes. On 14 December 1992, in the house I'm sitting right now, I brought together Mulayam Singh Yadav of Samajwadi Party and Kashi Ram, the founder of Bahujan Samaj Party. I brought them together and they went into an alliance. They were totally opposed to each other, but I played a role in bringing them together. Similarly, in 1996, I brought Congress and Bahujan Samaj Party together and created an alliance between Congress and Bahujan Samaj Party. So by moving from one party to the other, I have brought them together, not into confrontation. So I was playing a bridging role as well. And that was the reason that I was on equally good terms with all these leaders most of the time.
Let me change the conversation and talk about your work with the late Prime
Yes.
Minister Rajiv Gandhi. What are
Yes.
your thoughts of him as a Prime Minister of India? When you think of Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, what do you think of his legacy in terms of political determination, dignity, democracy, freedom, and development and science and technology? Do you believe that that he sowed the seed and laid the firm foundation for modern India?
Absolutely. You said what he laid the foundations of modern India, of young India, of 21st century India. He was a very reluctant politician. This I know for a fact. He was not interested. He didn't want to be in politics. He didn't want to be the prime minister. If anybody is accidental prime minister, it was Rajiv Gandhi. Accidentally, because of his brother's sudden death, Sanjay Gandhi, he came into politics. He was forced into politics by his mother and by the party. And then by the sudden assassination of his mother, Indira Gandhi, he was forced to become the prime minister. He became the prime minister, but once he took the responsibility, he took it very, very seriously. And I have known him very closely. He was responsible for pulling me into politics. I wouldn't have been in politics if it was not for him. And I realized his sincerity, his determination, and his vision for making India not just the urban middle class, but rural India, the poor India, the common India, to come into modern age. He brought about the IT revolution. I remember in 1987, I went with him to DC, and President Reagan was there, and he made a pitch for India getting a supercomputer, but India needed a supercomputer for many jobs to do well, but that was not possible for Americans to give because of the India's nuclear policy. And while we were coming back, he invited me and Mr. M.J. Akbar, who was also a journalist at that time, and another journalist, into his cabin, Prime Minister's cabin on the flight. And he said that, look, I wanted a supercomputer, but we have failed to get it from President Reagan. So at that point, I said, why don't we give all the possible resources to our scientists who are good enough to create some kind of supercomputer? He laughed. He said, I will give all the possible resources, but let's see what happens. But in trying to create a supercomputer, he made India IT superpower, because that's what he did. And that's the biggest revolution, the communication revolution he brought about, the telephone system, the change in India. The IT system was taken to the villages, to the schools. That when even in the West, the school children were not getting IT, education. Rajiv Gandhi saw to it that they got it, and that's, I think, his biggest contribution. But his other contribution was that he realized that if you want India to unite and grow, you have to bring all the people together. And he went to China. I went with him to China. He resolved the problem with China. I went with him to Pakistan, and he had reached that point where they were to resolve all the issues with Benazir Bhutto. But unfortunately, we all advised him to go for early polls, so that once he comes back with more seats, he is in a position to do an agreement with Pakistan on Kashmir and all other Siachen and other issues. But he went to early polls, but lost the elections, and that was unfortunate. But fortunately, he laid foundations of modern India, of which we are reaping the dividends at the moment.
You mentioned a couple of minutes ago about the assassination of President Kennedy. And his assassination, Rajiv Gandhi's, will also touch your heart and your soul as well.
Yes.
Because that was a sad news for India, and for that matter, for the whole world. Let me talk about you, your editor of the very influential Urdu weekly Naya Dunya for a long, long time. You also chaired the National Council for Promotion of Urdu Language. Would you be kind enough to share with our audience the status of Urdu language and Urdu education in India? Do you believe that Urdu education in India either dead or are in decline mode? And do you believe the decline of Urdu language should be blamed on the current political system in India?
No, I won't blame the current political system for the decline of Urdu language. The main reason for decline of Urdu language was unfortunate thesis of Muslim League and Mr. Jinnah that Muslims and Hindus are two different nations, and he pegged it on the idea that Urdu and Hindi were two different languages. Urdu was the language of Muslims, which is not true, which is not a fact. Languages don't have any religion, and there was more. Urdu was more popular in Punjab among the Sikhs, among the Hindus, than even among the Muslims. So partition of India was mainly responsible for the decline of Urdu language, but that did not make Urdu totally, redundant. In fact, it changed its character, and I played some role in doing that. My father, Maulana Abdul Bhai Siddiqui, who brought out his first paper in 1951, Nai Duniya, the daily paper, we played an important role because we realized that Urdu cannot be anymore the language of the classes. It has to be the language of the masses. So from Persianized Urdu, we started using lot of Hindi words because ultimately Urdu and Hindi are sister languages.
Yes,
their grammar is same, their vocabulary is same, except for some more Persian words in Urdu and some more Sanskrit words in Hindi, and their script is different. And Urdu's social base change, it from the language of the upper class, it became the language of the common man of through madrasas, through other and those who are becoming first-time literate. In the rural areas, the weavers, the others who are first-time becoming literate, they went for Urdu language, Urdu education. And moreover, the Urdu's geographical base changed. Earlier, Urdu's geographical base was North India, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Punjab. But now the base of Urdu is Karnataka, Andhra, Bengal, Maharashtra. You will say, how come? Because in North India, Urdu was in competition with Hindi language. And therefore, the state in trying to push Hindi, and because of this division of Hindi and Urdu on the basis of partition, Urdu was pushed into the background. It did not get the opportunities and the freedom to grow. But Urdu has its own dynamic. And therefore, Urdu grew very well because in South, they were trying to stop Hindi, not Urdu. And in the process, Urdu was able to grow. Even in Tamil Nadu, you will be surprised. Then in a district like Vaniambadi, 2-3 districts in Tamil Nadu where if you speak in Hindi, you have a problem. But there are schools which are purely Urdu medium schools in Tamil Nadu. And so, same in Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, because of Nizam rule till the very till the time of independence. And in Maharashtra, Bombay, Calcutta has always been one of the biggest centers of Urdu, where Urdu grammar, Britishers were able to codify Urdu grammar in the Fort William College. So Calcutta has always been a very, very important center of Urdu. So Urdu has grown there. Even in Bihar, Urdu is not in that bad shape as it is in Uttar Pradesh or in Punjab.
Yeah. And I want to talk to you, as you are passionate, I am also very passionate. You have been deeply engaged in the promotion of education among Muslims.
Yes.
I've given many speeches on that topic.
Yes.
In particular, empowering women with education so that their voices are heard, so they can determine their own destiny.
Yes.
And so that the India can also will be able to promote the woman so that they can exploit their fullest potential.
Yes.
And they are trapped, the women are trapped in poverty because of the lack of education, and their success should be our success. But I want you to, India, as you know, the Muslims, as you know, that the education is a powerful equalizer. Education empowers the mind and uplifts the soul.
Right.
And education is the best investment we can make to create the next generations. And education is the key to our success. And education, as President Obama said, frees the human mind from the shackles of ignorance. And education is the currency of the 21st century. My question is, the situation for many Indian Muslims are desperate and heartbreaking. They share a city, but not a community. They share a common dwelling, but not in a common effort. And because of the lack of education, there's a lack of opportunity that in turn breeds violence, that fuels frustrations and desperations. Your take.
Yes, long time back, at very young age, in the 70s, I realized that the key to not only Muslim success but India's success
Yes.
was in education, and especially educating Indian Muslims in by modern education. And therefore I focused on education, and there I have always believed and learned from the Jews, because we are a minority in India despite being such a large number. We are one of the biggest Muslim group in the world. I mean,
We are the second largest Muslim country
maybe
in the world.
second in population.
Yes.
But despite that, we are not participating as much as we should and as we want in India's growth and development. And there I learned from the Jews that despite all the oppression they faced throughout the centuries and all over the world, they were able to come back and have a place of respect and position for themselves, not through politics, but mainly through education and economic growth. And therefore, I said that is the key, that is the way, that is the road we have to follow. And I can assure you, I know it for a fact. So many of my friends who did well in education, they immediately got the jobs. Nobody stopped them. In India, and I salute Indian leadership after independence. I salute the majority community in India, that you are not discriminated if you are good in education, if you are competitive. But the unfortunate part was that at a go, the educated Muslim middle class went to Pakistan, and any community for change needs the vehicle of change and reform is always the educated middle class. That educated middle class was missing in India in the first few decades of independence. And that's where people like us came in, the next generation, which had to play a role. But most of our educated Muslims were afraid to play their role because they thought that they will be dubbed as communal. They wanted to prove their secularism, so they kept themselves away from the Muslim community. And that's why I brought out this Nai Dunya, in order to work in the community and tell them that, look, do whatever politics you want, go to any party you want, but your ultimate goal should be to educate yourself, and especially your women, because there was a mindset which believed that women's education is not required, or is not necessary, is not important. And that's why even as a member of parliament, 90% of the grants which we could give was for me was to schools, and especially Muslim women schools. Although I as a secular leader, I gave it to all communities, but I focused on women education, Muslim women education in the rural areas of the Western UP, in Saharanpur, Muzaffarnagar, Bijnor, Meerut, these areas, because I thought that if we are able to educate these young girls, we will be educating our next 2-3 generations, because it is these women who are going to, create the educated young Muslims who will contribute to the building of the nation. And that is the reason why Indian Muslims are different. I mean, if you really want to know, I want to talk about that, why Indian Muslims are different from other Muslim
communities. After I talk about the interfaith dialogue, education allowed me to cross the Atlantic Ocean to realize, to achieve the American dream. And as you probably know, is the education, because what I got from Aligarh Muslim University really made me who I am today. But the situation in India, because the Indian Muslims face the hostility and prejudice, do you believe that you look at the brighter horizon? How do we educate them when they do not have the means and mobility and the money for them to get a good education?
We have to come together. In fact, there is an education revolution taking place right now among the Muslims.
Okay.
There is just tremendous feeling that the only way for us to survive and to get our rightful, respectable place in the society is through education. Even in the rural areas, I see a huge change in last 10 years. And I give credit to this present setup, because of the present setup, Muslims realize that they don't have much of a future in politics, and therefore they started focusing more on education and economic growth. And especially in South India, a big jump is taking place. Recently, me and some of my very important friends like Mr. S.Y. Qureshi, who was a chief election commissioner, Mr. Najeeb Jang, who was
I do know.
we have formed a group, and we are forming a confederation of Muslim educational institutions to bring all of them together to cooperate, to help each other, to bring synergy between these institutions, so that the success in South India can be brought to North India, because people like you are doing great work, but you can give up to a point. Ultimately,
Right.
it's we ourselves who have to do it.
Yes,
It's a long time that we should have had an organization like that to bring all the educational institutions, NGOs, groups together for working for an educational revolution. So inshallah, we will be calling an education conference by next year. Because of COVID, our program got delayed, but then we will be having educational conference state-wise, nation-wise, among Muslims, and we will be bringing this school, the quality of education. There are a lot of schools. Muslims don't lack schools. Muslims don't lack madrasas. But what they lack is quality education, because these schools and madrasas are not run by highly educated Muslims. Again, I will say, who migrated to Pakistan or migrated out of India. Those who remained here were afraid to work in the community because they were thought that they will be dubbed as communal if the Muslim works for a Muslim. But I believe, as a secular Indian, it's my duty to see that those who are really backward, they are brought into the mainstream. It's not a communal act. If I work among Muslims, I should never be afraid of working among Muslims, because it is my duty as an Indian to do it.
Let's talk about your thoughts, to tell our audience about the Interfaith Peace Foundation, which you chair, and its activities. How successful has your foundation been in promoting the interfaith dialogue, considering that India is polarized? But I do believe that the people of different faith and different creeds can come together to achieve the communal peace harmony, and they should treat the people the way they want to be treated, by giving dignity and respect to others. But I want to talk a little bit about the interfaith, because interfaith dialogue allows us to build bridges, as you said earlier, to break down the barriers, and to promote the dialogue that various faiths, and to promote a shared sense of community. We need to strengthen the bond that binds us together as one family. We need to make sure that everyone and all the people have equal chance to succeed, and they have equal opportunity and inclusive economic mobility. Your thoughts?
Frank, I have been working on these ideas from my very young days, but did not form an organization. Unfortunately, I have been one of those journalists who has visited more communally disturbed areas from Bhagalpur, Ahmedabad, Meerut, Maliana, Hashimpura, Muradabad, you name any, and I have been there and worked there to bring people together and to help people get out of the situation they were pushed into. And it was mainly after Muzaffarnagar riots that I decided, because the riots reached the rural areas. Earlier, riots were, confined to urban towns, small towns. But in rural areas, there was never any Hindu-Muslim animosity of the type which we saw during the Muzaffarnagar riots. And that's why I got very, very perturbed. And first, I formed the organization Samajik Ekta Manch, that is Social Unity Center. And I went to villages and called meetings of Hindus and Muslims and worked with them, along with Mr. Jayant Chaudhary, who is the leader of Rashtriya Lok Dal. He's the grandson of the Prime Minister Charan Singh, and that is the area where he's very active and is very powerful. And that is the area I've been politically active. I have contested elections from there, and therefore I worked in those areas. And then I formed this Interfaith Peace Foundation in order to bring different communities and people together. I won't say that we have been very successful in recent times, because globally the situation has been very, very volatile and very, very explosive because of what happened in Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan, and now again the return of Taliban. But at the same time, I have been within my community, I have been trying to explain to people that their path is not, and the path of Islam is not the path of Taliban, is not the path of which was, you know, pursued by ISI. The path of Islam and path of Indian Muslims especially is the path of reconciliation, peace, understanding, and human, you know, togetherness.
And Islam, I believe that Islam teaches equality, dignity, tolerance, and respect for other faiths, and that's what you believe in it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I believe that our religion has been hijacked by certain groups who are using our religion for their own political ends, because they have their own political problems with the West, or with some colonial powers, or their own rulers. For example, in Iraq, they had problems with Saddam Hussein. In Syria, the different groups and communities had problems with Assad. And so similarly, in Afghanistan, they had problems because of the Soviet occupying Afghanistan, and then they're fighting back the Soviets. The religion was used. Religion, and I'm sorry to say, religion, Islam was used as kind of extremist version of Islam, which is not true version, was unfortunately used by the West, especially by the Americans, to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan in the 70s and 80s. So these groups like Al-Qaeda and Taliban were propped up there, and they got the roots there, and now it has become so difficult to get rid of them. And some people started believing that that was true Islam. The young people who are, unfortunately, people don't study Islam anymore from the Quran or from the, it is the Sheikh Google who teaches them Islam now. So Sheikh Google has learning Islam from Google is a very terrible and dangerous idea. And that has led to these young people following Islam, which is not true Islam, because I learned my Islam from my father, Maulana Abdul Bhai Siddiqui, who was a Deobandi Ulama Alim. But my four sisters in 50s and 60s and 70s, they were all highly educated, no burqa ever. They were all PhDs in their subjects. My father encouraged every woman to go for higher education and to do their jobs, being a Maulana, because he believed that in Islam, there was no way that women could be kept at homes. Women were not to be, you know.
But if you remember, I mean, I do not know much about it, but I understand that the Prophet Muhammad's wife, Aisha, rode the horses in order for her to fight in the battle.
Absolutely.
So yes. That's the. I wanted to close the conversation because we don't have too much time left, but I want to give you the opportunity, as you suggested that I should. India has the second largest Muslim population in the world. Do you believe the Indian Muslims have a distinct culture and history and heritage which distinguishes them from the Muslims in other countries?
I will say India has a distinct culture. Indian democracy is very, very unique. And I give all the credit, not just to Indian Islam. Indian Islam is also very distinct, because in India, Muslims did rule for centuries, but they were never the majority. They ruled the country as a minority, and therefore they brought out the gems of reconciliation, of love from the same Quran, from where other groups which were dominant brought out the ideas of confrontation. Because it depends on you. The same Bible, the same Quran, the same Bhagavad Gita contains all ideas. It is for you what you take from it. It's a you know, river from which you can get what you want to get. So Indian Islam, so Sufi Islam, the Hazrat Muinuddin, Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia, Hazrat Amir Khusro, or the poets like Ghalib, they brought out the most beautiful aspects of Islam, and that's why Indian Muslims were different. Secondly, Indian Hindus are so different. I give a lot of credit to Indian majority who, despite partition and Jinnah asking for separation of India and creating Pakistan, did not create a Hindu Rashtra in India. They went for a secular, democratic India where the constitution gave equal rights to Muslims. And because Muslims, despite of riots, Muslims of India have faced difficult situations. I won't say that it was rosy at all. It was very, very difficult in the post-partition independence period. But they got the freedom to vote a government, vote in a government, vote out a government, equal rights, and therefore their anger was, pent up anger came through elections and through votes, not through a gun. It's through ballot that they showed their anger and played a very, very important role in bringing and changing governments. Or Congress party, which was so popular among the Muslims, is now in dumps because of Muslims deciding to move away from Congress, especially in UP, Bihar, Bengal, where Muslim population is the largest. And therefore, I give credit to Indian democracy, I give credit to the heritage, and I give credit to Indian leadership of all political parties, and especially to the Indian majority of Indians, the Hindus, the Sikhs, Christians, everybody who know that we must live together and we must give space to each other. And giving space is extremely important. And that's where Muslims were able to flower despite their anger. Anger is very much there, but anger doesn't take the shape of a bullet. It always comes through ballot. And that's a beautiful thing.
Let me close our conversation. Thank you for all you're doing in terms of the interfaith dialogue and empowering the Indian Muslims. Yes. Attack on one faith is attack on all faith. When we attack each other, we are tearing apart the harmonious fabric of a nation.
Absolutely.
And that's what we all have to understand, that we got to figure out how to live together and how to work together and how to heal together.
Absolutely.
So thank you for coming to our show. We deeply appreciate your time. And thank you. This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week. Thank you for watching.